Good evening, everybody, and England Sports weekly podcast. As I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and as always, everybody, I'm glad that you've decided to join me. If you're watching the live stream, hello and welcome in, or if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcast. I am glad that you decided to join me this evening. All right. And of course, I am happy to be joining you as well in this post football world that we're living in, at least for the next, 212 days or whatever that is, as we had Super Bowl 57 last weekend in a pretty exciting game, although the ending got spoiled there a little bit by that holding call that robbed Philly of a chance to go down and at least get the game tying field goal, if not a game winning touchdown, with about a minute 48 or so left on the clock. But again, it's that kind of not dark time of season, because obviously NHL and hockey regular season still going on, but you don't have any football. Baseball hasn't started yet. And if you're up here in the Northeast, all you got to look forward to is at least another 6 weeks, at least 7 weeks here, more of winter time here between February and March. So we're all slogging through like we do each and every year. But we do have lots to talk about, though. We'll talk about, obviously, the big game and what happened there in Super Bowl 57. Of course, we got a lot going on here in the Boston sports scene as well, with the Celtics and the Bruins. And, of course, Red Sox spring training getting ready to kick off, or already has. So we will dive right in with another out of the box segment, as always, still brought to you by me and maybe our friends at 47 brand maybe want to kick in here. But it is, again, the Kansas City Chiefs walked away with the win in Super Bowl 57, a 38-35 win. They got a field goal victory, as I predicted the Eagles would. It just flip-flopped, a 38-35 victory for Kansas City. And Patrick Mahomes was named Super Bowl MVP, getting his second Super Bowl MVP along with his second regular season MVP. So he finally broke the curse of regular season MVPs not winning since Kurt Warner did back in 1999. So he was broke that 24-year-old streak there. So that took him a while. That took a while, but finally somebody broke it. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about that game as well. But man, did Kansas City get screwed on that holding call there at the end? Not Kansas City, Philadelphia got screwed on that holding call. At least another chance to maybe possibly get another score, tie the game, or get a touchdown, as we mentioned. But nonetheless, Kansas City walked away. It is their second Super Bowl in 5 years, is that they won in 2019. Or 4 years, excuse me. But the season is now over, and we are into the NFL offseason. And there haven't been too many Patriots notes since some of the coaching changes. Not a lot going on from that end, but we will definitely dive into their offseason. And over in the Garden, the Boston Celtics narrowly lost in overtime last night to the Milwaukee Bucks, excuse me. They lost 131 to 125, although it looked as though they were going to lose by 3 at the very end of the game, but Sam Hauser knocked down an incredible shot with 3 seconds to go, and the Celtics ended up pushing it into overtime. And mind you, that was with 4 of their 5 starters were out. Obviously, we know Jaylen Brown is out with a facial fracture. Marcus Smart still coming back from the hamstring injury, at least last night. And Jason Tatum was out with a non-COVID illness, and Al Horford was not in the game last night. They did have Robert Williams, although he only played 17 minutes last night, so he was not there for a lot of the game. Although good news is tonight they flew right back home and they had a quick turnaround to play the Detroit Pistons, who that game is underway right now. And Jason Tatum was back from his illness. Marcus Smart is back in the lineup. So he is back and healthy. And of course, Al Horford was back, and Robert Williams himself was in the lineup as well. Actually, sorry, Robert Williams was out of the lineup tonight, along with Mike Muscala, who they got at the trading deadline for the Boston Celtics. And that was their big acquisition as well, getting Mike Muscala from the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that was nothing seismic, but you did get a big that can kind of rotate in and out between the center and forward position, a la Al Horford in that way. So they got that. Not, like I said, not massive, but a nice rotational piece that we'll see how that kind of fits into the Celtics rotation as we go down the stretch and eventually into the playoffs. But everybody except for Jaylen Brown, it seems to be back. And the good news on the Jaylen Brown front is it seems as though the injury may not be as long as we thought. Maybe is it seems as though he already got fitted for his mask and he has the mask already. And there's some talk maybe he might go to the All-Star game, although that is a little up in the air, but he's still on the active roster because there have been other players from across the league that have had to back out due to injury. But in this case, Jaylen Brown still has not been ruled out. So we'll see if he plays in that All-Star game. But it seems as though after the All-Star game, he will certainly be, maybe if he doesn't play in that All-Star game, maybe take another week off or so. But it seems as though they will have Jaylen Brown back sooner than we thought, which will be a nice piece to have back and have your full roster going again, especially with Derek White, who's been cooking. So things are looking up for the Boston Celtics and the Boston Bruins, who before the All-Star break did break their skid and beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. Then right after, they lost a 2-1 road game against the Washington Capitals on Sunday. Although they were able to pick themselves up and win in overtime thanks to a brilliant shot by David Pastrnak, and they won 3-2 and kick off a road trip on the high note, or I should say kick off their second leg of the road trip on a high note. So they look as though they may be trying to get out of that funk that they were right before the All-Star break. Because if they had lost last night, it would have been 4 out of 5 losses, and one of the first times that you really could have hit the panic button on that Bruins team. But things are looking a lot better for the Bruins, but we're still 3 weeks out from the trade deadline, which is March 7th. Excuse me. So there's still time, that's insane because I always feel like I say that about the NHL trade deadline, that it's far away every year, but this year really it does seem like that's far out because we've already seen some pretty big trades, especially with Bo Horvat going to the Islanders. Like that seemed forever ago. That was just a couple weeks ago. So there already has been some movement. So we'll see how the Bruins want to attack the trade deadline as well. And the Boston Red Sox have kicked off spring training, as today was the first official day from the fort, as we did see some new faces. Justin Turner was there. Of course, old friends like Chris Sale were back and on the mound. So we'll see how that goes for Chris Sale. Just keep away any bikes and maybe don't even get on an exercise bike, Chris. We don't need you. We don't need you snapping any more arms or you know what? Just put a bubble around him until the regular season starts. Just let him kind of throw out of like the Michelin Man suit and see how it goes through spring training. Just build up the arm strength that way. Because man, they can't afford to not have you in that pitching rotation. Although you kind of the way things are going, you have to treat it as though he's not part of I was talking through the offseason, I should say, as though you can't treat him as part of the rotation just because he's so injury prone and you had to get more depth, which I'm surprised the Red Sox didn't bring a guy like Michael Walker back or go out, try to make a trade in the starting rotation to bolster that depth. But of course, in this offseason of head scratching moves, that just goes to the top of the pile. Why you didn't go out and try to get another top of the line arm for this rotation? I know technically you can still get something done because of it. Well, you can get something done at any time up until the trade deadline, technically at this point of the year, but you catch my drift. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out during spring training, but it's underway and expectations are through the floor, not through the roof. It might be through the floor, just the way that the offseason goes. So we'll definitely dive into that a little bit more as we roll on through the show. All right. And that will wrap up our out of the box segment. Thank you to myself for that one. Maybe someday by any of our good friends at any of these great companies out there will be able to sponsor the segment. But nonetheless, we will dive right into. We don't really have a main topic here, as though there's kind of a little bit of everything. It's kind of a poo-poo platter, if you will, of an entree out there with a lot of things kind of wrapping up and starting and underway. Kind of, we have a little bit of everything here. Of course, we'll talk about the Super Bowl as though that was the fresh on our minds as far as from last week, as the Kansas City Chiefs did take down the Philadelphia Eagles. And like I said earlier, was a pretty entertaining game from the standpoint of offense in that game. There were really no hiccups until the end of that game. And you just saw how valuable it was for the Philadelphia Eagles when they made that offseason move of getting A.J. Brown in the game. He had a touchdown and a couple big plays in that game, really made his presence known. He was a little quiet in the postseason up until this point, but Philly really focused on getting him the ball. Devontae Smith made a lot of plays, but of course, the probably the best player on the field was Jalen Hurts all night long. I know Patrick Mahomes won it because his team won the Super Bowl, and usually, unless you're Bob Morrow, God, he was the linebacker for the Cowboys who just went to the Hall of Fame this offseason. Unless you're him, nobody else has won a Super Bowl MVP from the losing team. So it was obviously he wasn't going to get MVP, but he was the best player out on the field. And the Eagles found a way to win that game. He was going to get the MVP just the way it was going all night. The Eagles had a 10-point lead at half, although when you're playing Patrick Mahomes, I never feel comfortable with, unless you're up by like 30, 34, 35, you're up by 40, then I'm not feeling great about that one. And I like I told you last week, I thought maybe that Philadelphia defensive line would show up and make their presence more known, which surprisingly did not really happen last Sunday. They didn't get. I don't, if I remember, because there was about 4 minutes left in the game, they flashed the sacks, and there was only one in the game by Kansas City, and they really didn't get to Patrick Mahomes other than a couple times, though obviously the one infamous one, if you want to put it that way, where Patrick Mahomes is limping off the field and looked like he just got shot, just kind of like Mac Jones did when he got pulled off against the Baltimore Ravens in week 3. But that shocked me. I know we're kind of going a little all over the place here, but that was kind of the shock there, was that the defense for Philly, as far as pass rush wise, didn't really show up like I thought was going to happen. I thought there'd be a lot more hurries, a lot more rushing out of the pocket to get away from the pass rush of Philadelphia, but that was not a big factor. And of course, kind of circling around back to the offensive side of things, Kansas City just they scored 35, although the defense, offensively they didn't score 35, they scored in the 20s. What was it, 28 points, 20, 24, 28 points, whatever it ended up being, because they did get that touchdown on the defensive recovery. Patrick Mahomes had the 3 touchdowns, but only threw for 187 yards. It wasn't their best performance that I've seen out of Kansas City, but I mean, it would kind of like what Tom Brady used to do. It just come up when it matters most, and you might maybe not putting up 300, 350 yards, 400 some odd yards in a Super Bowl, but you're coming through when it matters most, when you need them to put points on the board, and that's what happened. And but I still wasn't like overly blown away by Kansas City until you kind of felt the floodgates kind of open up there late in that late in the fourth quarter, and Philadelphia. I don't know what happened at some points late in that game, as though because that offense was able to just kind of march down the field though that first half against Kansas City, who they have a decent defense. It's not to me, it's a middle of the pack defense, and they were able to put up quick points on Kansas City. But I came basically my takeaway from that one. I was more impressed by what Philadelphia did than what Kansas City did, even though they won the game. And what that kind of, if you want to wrap that up into what the Patriots need to do, or kind of put a Patriots kind of spin on this, is just look at what getting a number 1 wide receiver did for a guy like Jalen Hurts. Because I know people want to say, well, Patrick Mahomes didn't do it. Brady, for all those years, didn't have maybe the number 1 wide receiver. But we're talking about, obviously, in Patrick Mahomes, we're talking about the best quarterback in the league right now, who can do amazing things with his arm alone, and is becoming even smarter by the day as far as football wise. He's just he is miles ahead as far as any other quarterback right now. As much as I love Joe Burrow and as talented as Josh Allen is, guys like that, and whoever else you want to throw in there, the Lamar Jacksons of the world, Jalen Hurts, everybody like that. If whoever you want to throw into this conversation of quarterbacks, obviously, well, Aaron Rodgers is obviously in that group, and depending on if he still plays when he comes out of his darkness retreat, wherever he's going, hanging upside down like Batman all night long. I don't know what the hell he's doing. That's a whole other story for a whole nother day. He's just he's being a whack job like he usually is. But the point here is that Philly, what Philly did, because they don't have the guy, they have a good quarterback. They have a guy that I really like in Jalen Hurts, but he's not obviously to the same level as Patrick Mahomes. So you have to get more talent around him. So what my point being here is, if you're in New England, you have to kind of look at that blueprint of what Philadelphia did and what the Bengals have done, what the Bills have done in your own division. Go out, surround these guys with talent, but not just, all right, we're going to get guys like Nelson Aguilar. And as much as I love Kendrick Bourne, he's not a Stephon Diggs or Jamar Chase and AJ Brown. You need to get elite number 1 wide receivers, either through trading or through the draft. And that's something, obviously, draft wise, Bill Belichick is not really hammered home on any superstar wide receivers. He really hasn't struck gold early in the draft lately. The last early round wide receiver that he's picked was Deion Branch in the 2nd round. Now, maybe next year, Tyquan Thornton under Bill O'Brien, maybe they unlock him. I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath. I saw flashes last year where I was like, okay, there might be something in there. And then the last 4 games of the season, it just seemed like he faded away from that standpoint. But I'm I know people are gun shy about him in the draft, but maybe this is where you take a shot at somebody like a Zay Flowers. I know. Yeah, I mean, at 14, that's a little rich for my blood, so that's where I'm willing to trade down. into like the low 20s, you're in the 21st, 22nd pick, somewhere in that neighborhood. If you like that guy and try to get some more draft capital, or maybe you pick a tackle with your 14th pick and maybe you use some of the draft capital that you have, because what you have 6 picks within the top like 4 rounds, something along those lines. You have a lot of high end capital this year with some picks that you made. And I know overall, what do you have, like a 11 if you count some of the lower round picks in there too. So maybe you package some of that to get back into the first round and take Zay Flowers, because he's risen a lot, because he was started the year as probably a second round, like a second round pick. Well, more a second round pick, and he's really shown, even through a lackluster quarterback situation at BC, he's shown he can be explosive. He runs a 4.3. He would be perfect for the Patriots, but I don't know if taking him at 14, it might be a little rich. For my blood, maybe you go after an Addison out of USC. I don't know if you're going to be able to get Johnston out of TCU. He probably is going to go top 10, if not top 5, possibly. But if you try to go through the draft, that I still would take a shot. I know some people are gun shy. Take a shot at that. Now, obviously, I would love for them to go out and trade for T. Higgins, because that's a guy that I think can be a true number one. We saw just his 1 year by himself before they drafted Jamar Chase. T. Higgins was a stud. He was really good his first year there in Cincinnati. And if they didn't draft Jamar Chase, and let's say that they ended up taking the tackle out of Oregon at the time, why am I blanking on it? He ended up going to the Lions, but he was the big pick at the time, because remember, Cincinnati needed a lot of help at on their offensive line. I mean, they still kind of do, in my opinion. But anyways, in the second round, they used that pick on T. Higgins. And if they the year before, and T. Higgins in his first year, he played in 16 games. Now, obviously, as a rookie, it's a little slow, but once he got up to speed, he had 67 catches for 908 yards and 6 touchdowns. Again, you kind of have to put this through a little bit of grain of salt there with probably the first 4 weeks or 5 weeks, when Cincinnati was still getting used to, because that was also 2020 was Joe Burrow's rookie year as well. So the point being here is that if they, I think he would have been Cincinnati's unquestioned number one if in 2021, if they didn't draft Jamar Chase and drafted Penei Sewell, then I think he would be the one that we'd all look to with the super stats that that we see coming from Jamar Chase. Well, I mean, Jamar Chase in his own right is better. He's already in the top, in my opinion, is probably in that conversation for top 5, top 10 minimum, top 5 wide receivers. He's in that conversation as well. But the point being here is that this is a guy that already, as a number 2 behind Jamar Chase, his back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He's bordered on an 1,100-yard season with 6 touchdowns and 6 touchdowns. His rookie year, 6 touchdowns in his sophomore year, and then 7 last year. So he's got 19 touchdowns, and this is a lot of damage the last 2 years as the number 2 guy. And this is a guy that he has the physical size. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, but he's got speed as well. We're not talking about N'Keal Harry, some big physical guy that just bodies up and he doesn't bring out a lot of else to the party. No, this is a guy that's got speed. He's got size and strength, can run good routes. So this is also a guy that Cincinnati, are they going to have enough in their cap room to sign Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase? Because those, you can't let either one of those two go. I mean, Jamar Chase, as much as I love T. Higgins, like I just said, Jamar Chase is the better receiver there. But T. Higgins in his own right is a number one wide receiver. And are they going to want to pony up another $25 million a year for another wide receiver? Are they going to be able to afford that? So is Cincinnati in this offseason, are they going to want to look to try to get some draft capital for T. Higgins and try to recoup some of that before he just hits the open market next offseason? If they don't plan on giving him that big deal, or if T. Higgins doesn't take a hometown discount, which, I mean, obviously, if I'm T. Higgins, I might probably take a hometown discount to stay with Cincinnati so that I have a shot at winning a Super Bowl with that team that's already been to one and went to the AFC Championship game and was so close to winning it, if not for some head-scratching decisions. So the point being is, I think you have to go out, do what Philadelphia did when they traded for A.J. Brown. You have to go out and find, I think the best route to do this, because the free agency market is bare this year. Jacoby Myers is the number one wide receiver, which they have to bring him back no matter what happens, because I think he is, and obviously, unless some situation where you get one of these number one guys and you kind of have to put a lot more of that money there, which that's another kind of thing in its own. Belichick, I don't know if that's the thing you have to ask yourself. If you're Belichick, are you willing to give up the first round pick with a second round pick and whatever other compensation that Cincinnati would be looking for to get T. Higgins? And then also on top of that, are you going to pay for it? I definitely would. I'd sign up every day of the week for that, every day to go get T. Higgins. I think he would be that good. Now, are there other guys that you can kind of look around, and we'll take a look as the offseason goes around, but that's kind of one of my thoughts coming out of the Super Bowl, as far as if you're the Patriots, you have to do what Philadelphia did, go balls to the walls and just give up some of that capital if you already have guys you believe in, because I believe in Mac Jones. I think he can be the guy. You just have to surround him with talent, because when I say he can be the guy, do I say he's going to be Patrick Mahomes, or if he's going to be Joe Burrow, Josh Allen? No, I'm not trying to make him out to be something he's not, but I think he can be a guy you can win with, is my point. Where some people want to say, oh, if you're supporting Mac Jones, that you think you're just he's going to be the next greatest thing since sliced bread. No, that's not what I'm saying. I think he can be in the Kirk Cousins mold, but maybe actually have the smarts and wherewithal and kind of the ability to make better decisions in the playoffs and in primetime moments. I'm not trying to make him out to be Patrick Mahomes. That's not what I'm trying to be. And I hate that people try to paint you into a corner like, oh, you're defending Mac Jones, that you think he's going to be this Hall of Fame quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer. That's not what I'm trying to say. The dude can play football, is my point, and you can win with him. He's not a stiff out there. He's not a backup like some people try to make it out to be, which is ridiculous. He showed what he can do in his rookie season. Now, with this, what I will say is, coming into this next season, because we're getting into that territory where this would be his third year, and he would have one more year after this before the Patriots have to make that decision if they want to pick up that fifth year option, which would be expensive. But or if you want to try to sign him a long-term extension, if you put up a season like he did in his rookie year, which was solid, but if he doesn't show improvements, if he doesn't throw more than 23 touchdowns, if he doesn't get into show you that he can throw 30 plus touchdowns and knock down some of the interceptions, if he can get into that territory, then you're like, all right, we got something. We have somebody that we can win with, and that's making improvements. Then, which I think he's capable of. And now that you have Bill O'Brien running the show, as far as on the offense, I think you have it. But you can't just bury your head in the sand either, though, and just say, oh, I'll pay him all the money. I'm not to that point either. I do have some doubts about it, but I do truly think he's a guy you can win with, but you have to surround him with talent. And what quarterback don't you have to surround with talent? Even guys like Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and Joe Montana, guys that are all-time greats that show that they can win without having number one guys like Mahomes did this year, like Brady did in the first 3 years of the dynasty. I know people want to, oh, defense, defense, defense. Yeah, but still, 03 Brady won at a shootout in that Super Bowl. And the Eagles Super Bowl the next year, that was a closer game. What was it, 24-21? So he had to put up points in that game. And so, yes, those guys have proven that they can, but we're talking about one of one with Tom Brady and one of one with Patrick Mahomes. These are special guys. These are all-time greats. But we almost saw it this year with a guy like Jalen Hurts, who he's not to the same level of Mahomes. He's not to the same level as some of these other stud quarterbacks, but he has the talent to do it. And he almost won after the Eagles showed that they went out and spent money on talent around him. So that's my whole point is you have to put talent around these guys. But eventually, even the all-time greats, like I know I mentioned Brady and Mahomes have done it, but later on in their careers, when you kind of get to that point where they become a video game offense and you maybe not put as many pieces on the defensive side of the ball, then that's where even the all-time greats do need some of those video game type of plays, those all-star Hall of Famers with them, because you're asking them to do a lot. So that's where sometimes you do need to kind of install some of those type of guys, depending on if you don't have the rest of the complement around them. But the point being here is that I think you can win with Mac, and you have to do what the teams like Philadelphia and Buffalo and Cincinnati have done, have invested in different ways, but to the same result of bringing talent into this organization. So that'll be interesting. We'll definitely talk a lot about that. Obviously, we got the combine coming up. Then in April, we'll have the draft at the end of the month. So we got a couple months to look into that and chip away at what the Patriots could do and what direction it's all going to go in. But it'll definitely be an interesting offseason now that they've sorted out the coaching and get everything settled before free agency and before the draft happens. So that'll be fun. Now, of course, we did mention off the top of the show that the Boston Celtics did lose in overtime last night as they were down 4 or 5 starters. So playing Milwaukee, I just thought that was going to be a loss to begin with. I mean, I know they ended up losing, but the point being is I just wrote that down before the game as just a loss. You didn't have anybody but Robert Williams, and he played sparingly, played 17 minutes in that game. I was very impressed because I would kind of had that on the background for a little bit. I'm like, this might, and then was flipping over to the Bruins game because that was going to be the more entertaining one, I thought, the whole night. But what was it, halftime? And they were right near halftime. They were leading, and at points they had a 9-10 point lead. And you're like, wait a second, this is the Celtics bench that is giving Milwaukee a run for its money. And mind you, Milwaukee had Giannis Antetokounmpo, their star. They had Middleton and Drew Holiday. So they had their big three, or however you want to term it. They had at least their big two, their big duo with Giannis and Middleton. But if you're Milwaukee, that was more, I guess they won, but it was more, I guess embarrassing is not the right word, but it's a little kind of disheartening that you got taken to the wire. You got taken to overtime because Sam Hauser came in and knocked down that key shot with 3 seconds to go in that game. And Derek White, who we'll talk about here in a second, continued his torrid run. But if you're Milwaukee, that'd be a little disheartening that you almost got beat by the Celtics bench. Now, obviously, towards the end of the game, the Celtics bench was running out of a little bit of steam because they had been out there a lot during the night. And Muscala, who they just traded for, was out there for 39 minutes because they had to play that whole 52 minutes into the overtime. So they were duct tape and bubble gumming that lineup together. But it does show you the depth that the Celtics bench has. Now, I know some people obviously wanted the big splash. They wanted to get the Kevin Durant in the trade deadline, or they wanted to go Jakob Poeltl, or some other bigger names that were out there on the market or thought to be available. I know Celtics fans were clamoring for that, but it does show you, at least in this loss, though, that it does show you the depth that this Celtics team has. Once you get tonight they got a lot of their starters back in Tatum. Marcus Smart is finally back. You have Al Horford back. Robin Williams is out, but Jaylen Brown seems as though he might be on his way back sooner rather than later. But for me, it bodes well going down through the rest of the season, as far as showing, especially with guys like Derek White, who have been on fire and have put up multiple 20-point games. And that was even when you had guys like Jason Tatum in the lineup when he was filling in for Marcus Smart. And even before Jaylen Brown got smacked in the face, or got an elbow to the face by Jason Tatum, a week and a half ago, Derek White was still filling in and putting up 20 points, because he had that night where he went unconscious from three, just knocking him down. There's one I thought he was going to have a heat check and miss it, but he kissed it off the glass and into the basket. And I'm like, that's utter ridiculousness. They ended up winning that game. So Derek White has stepped up in a big way, and he gives you another piece off the bench. So your guard spot is deep, because you have obviously Marcus Smart, the starting guard. You have Brogdon, who would be a starter on 28 other teams, or in a large chunk of teams across the league. And he's your sixth man off the bench, because obviously he came here because he wants to win a title. So I mean, and obviously then you throw in Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, obviously, and Peyton Pritchard. So you got you have four really good guards at different levels. Obviously, two starting caliber guards. Derek White, who's looked like a starting caliber guard and is a great addition off that bench. So and then Grant, and then not Grant, but Sam Hauser, who's starting to heat up again. He went through a cold spell. He started off hot in the beginning of the year in November, December, and then over January he went kind of through that whole cold spell. But he's heating back up. As last night on the road against Milwaukee, he had big shot after big shot, and of course capped it off with the game tire at the end of regulation before they ended up losing in overtime. But again, there's more depth, and obviously I'm not trying to make Sam Hauser out to be anything more than he's not, because obviously this is a guy that once you get to the playoffs and once you pare everything down to an 8 to 9 man rotation, and depending on the night, maybe you just have three guys coming off the bench and you play a lot of your starters, or maybe you have seven, who knows. You don't dig super deep into that bench during the playoffs, but this is still a guy that's going to be depth for you during the regular season to save guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, save their legs, get him ready for the playoffs. So they do have great depth on this team. And then Muscala, I mean, I wasn't like blowing the horn and tooting the horn there and like jumping up and down. Oh, they got Muscala. This is going to save their well, I mean, they're already the best team in the league when they got that trade, when they made the trade. But the point being here is, for Muscala, I like the move, because again, it gives you that depth, because you've had injury concerns with Robert Williams, and Al Horford's getting up there in age, and you really didn't have much depth at center and at wing as well. Wing, you didn't pass Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. It's Williams and Hauser and a couple other guys that can kind of fill in at wing, but you don't have a lot of great depth at wing. So that was where a guy that can switch back and forth is you just put him in that kind of big spot between either being a center or the power forward. And Muscala can shoot. I mean, as far as for a big man. So you did get a guy that can stretch the floor a little bit, and he has knocked down a few threes. And obviously he's out tonight, and you can kind of think that that's most likely a little bit of the load management after playing 39 minutes. But I do like what he's brought to the table. I really do. And the but the one negative kind of that's kind of come out of this is from the coaching standpoint with Joe Mazzulla. Now, I think Joe Mazzulla overall has done a pretty solid job, but there were some things that we did talk about before. I remember talking about before the season. Now, of course, where you have a Doka who got this team to the finals and really installed that culture last year. And then obviously we know everything that happened behind the scenes, and or at least parts of it that they'll tell us. But after that story broke, and you're like, all right, it's up to Joe Mazzulla, who really has never had really much of a head coaching experience except for kind of like in the G League and a few other places. And he's been on this Celtics bench since 2019. He's kind of an eclectic weirdo, I guess, if you will put it that way. Because remember, there was the whole telling Marcus Smart that, oh yeah, you can't do this after doing a somersault and some other things. And last night when he answered a question and was kind of a little snippy or a little kind of short, pulling the Belichick there, I guess if you want to term it that way. That's one part of it, but then the whole not knowing when to take some timeouts towards in certain key situations where I know he's that type of coach where he wants the players to play it out and figure it out and kind of work through it. I get it, but there are those times where, especially kind of late in that game, where it's finally, what was it, Derek White who took one of those timeouts. That there are time, and then even after the game, you had Mazzulla basically saying, yeah, maybe there might have been a few regrets there as far as maybe not taking a timeout at a little bit sooner. So for me, that was one of the concerns heading into this year was the inexperience that Mazzulla had of running a NBA franchise as far as being the head coach, and some of the green decision making that he's going to be forced into because again, remind you, he hasn't had a ton of head coaching as far as at the NBA level or even a lot of coaching at the NBA level. Or I shouldn't say that. A lot of the head coaching at the NBA level, because he's been, like I said, he has been here for what, 3 or 4 years. So he was on the previous staff with Brad Stevens. But my point with this whole situation is that it just they were just situations that like, are these going to be a little too big for him, or how is he going to react in this? Now, for the most part, there's been situations where he is past it, and and a couple times and some situations where he's gotten by with just the amount of talent on his roster. But there have been times where it has come back to bite him in the ass, and last night was kind of one of them where he should have taken one late into that game, where there were times in the last couple of minutes where Milwaukee was making a run. Maybe you want to cool them off and you want to kind of go over a few situations. But so that's the one concern that I have. And obviously that's something that you're going to want to monitor and watch going down the stretch of the regular season as we get into the playoffs, because obviously once you get into the playoffs, everything is ratcheted way, way up in these games. But I'm not hitting a panic meter or anything. This is not something that I'm sitting here and this is a 5-alarm fire. And man, we got to really watch out for this. But it's just something to note and to be a little bit concerned about, because like I said, for the most part, the Celtics team has showed their depth, their talent. They just are one of the best teams. They're probably the best team in the league, right there with Milwaukee. And as we saw last night, those are really the only two teams that I look at in the East, and I'm like, all right, these are the ones that are going to compete for a title. Obviously, the Nets are, after they blew everything up, they're out of the discussion. Miami, yeah, they always make things interesting in the playoffs, but they're not a true contender. If you want to throw Philly in, you can, but there's just something about a team that's got James Harden, and that Philly squad is just not proving it over the playoffs over the last 4 years or so. They just always seem to find a way to choke it away in the playoffs. So it just seems like it's Boston and Philly are the Boston, excuse me, and Milwaukee are the two teams out of the East that are going to be duking it out all the way through. And I mean, I know there's kind of been a little bit of debate up there whether Tatum and should have played last night, but if he was really sick, then I mean, I know people, oh, well, you got better yesterday. Yeah, but you could have been for the past 3 days felt like crap for 3 days. And today you woke up and you're like, all right, finally, I'm feeling a lot better. And you're able to play. Because I know some people want to play it up. Oh, it's just one of those maintenance days, or it's just one of those days where load management. I'm just going to take a day off, and why would you do it against Milwaukee? That was a dumb decision to do against Milwaukee. Then this just shows maybe a little lack of situational awareness and where your team's going to end up in the standings at the end of the year. I know people want to try to make it out to be more than it's not, and listen, I don't have any inside information. I don't have anything like that, but it doesn't bother me like I know it's bothered some other people because it's the regular season game. It's a game on friggin' February. Well, we're talking about last night, February 14th on Valentine's night. You want you want to bitch about this game? Yeah, if this happens in the playoffs, I'll be pissed off that Jason Tatum is not in the lineup. I mean, not because they said it wasn't COVID. I mean, okay, it's not COVID if you're just dealing with a cold or you're doing. I mean, unless you got the runs and you got to run to the bathroom all the time, then sure, okay, spot you that one. But if it happens in the playoffs and it's just a cold, of course I would be pissed and like, why aren't you playing? But to have to kind of get up in the arms about a February game where, yes, I know if Milwaukee, it right now it's 1-1 with Boston and Milwaukee in the season series. So that last game that they play, I believe it's in April, will decide who gets home court advantage if they were to meet up in the playoffs, if it is on the Eastern Conference Finals. But 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 it's just ridiculous to get all worked up and pissed off about a February game, at least in my opinion. But uh, listen, I think now that the Celtics are the All-Star break is coming up here shortly in the next week. So it's right at a perfect time. Of course, you got Jaylen Brown if he plays in the All-Star game or not, but more time for him to rest up. And of course, even though you got Marcus Smart back and Al Horford back, more time for them to rest up as well, and time to get healthy for the stretch run and into April and get ready for that playoff run as well. So I think it's coming up just at the perfect time for this All-Star break for the Celtics as they need to get healthy, because when they're healthy, their starting five and their benches is very deep. It's very deep. So it'll be interesting to see how the Celtics respond come All-Star after the All-Star break when everybody gets healthy. That's really what I'm excited here for, to see how that gets them revved up and gets them going for the playoff run here. Now, one other team trying to make a playoff run, trying to strengthen their playoff case because they're already the best team in hockey, and they were on pace to break the all-time points and wins record, but after a little bit of a skid here, losing, what was it, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5, they are trying to pick themselves back up, and they did last night. It looked a little, there were times where the first couple of periods it looked a little bit flat, but they finally did come alive late in that game as Dallas was ahead 2-1. The Bruins tied it up. And of course, the superstar in David Pastrnak showed up, got an amazing goal in overtime, and the Bruins win 3-2. But for me, I was just happy to see the Bruins come out against a really good Dallas Stars team, who by points leads the Western Conference in the NHL. So the Bruins had a tall task against them. Remember, before the All-Star break, they had to play the Toronto Maple Leafs. They did have another playoff team, or at least contender, in Washington coming back. So in the short sample, they're 2-1 against some playoff teams, and they've showed a little bit of grit. That's the one thing about this Bruins team where even during when they were just cruising right along, they've showed that they have the grit and they have the determination. And this is a team that I think can really do damage here in the play. I mean, obviously say that about the best team in hockey, but I'm just saying this is one of the more deep Bruins teams. And if you get Jacob DeBrusk back, who it sounds like it might just be another game or two before he's back, because we thought maybe he had a chance maybe tomorrow night, but that's not to be the case. It might be another couple of games. But when you get Jacob DeBrusk back, and then if you make a move for, let's say, a Patrick Kane at the deadline, or you go out and get Tarasenko from the St. Louis Blues, I think if you get another wing or center that you can bring in here, because the one I really wanted was Bo Horvat, because obviously he's still young. He's 28 years old, 29. This is the guy that you can sign long term to be your center of the future, to take over for Bergeron. That he would have created a lot of depth and would have locked up a lot of your future too. But he's gone as well. So you're looking at truly more of a rental market. But again, this is a situation where if I'm the Bruins, I'm all in. I am truly all in, especially with this veteran core. Yeah, you do have some good young guys, obviously, in Pastrnak, who's 25, 26 years old. You have Charlie McAvoy, who's 23, 24, somewhere along that lines. You have Hampus Lindholm, 28. Yeah, you have Swayman. So you have you have some good, really, really good young players. But then, of course, you have the Marchands, you have the Bergerons, you have the Krejcis, you have the older guys on this team that you're trying to win another cup with, and you're in one of your best positions you've been in a long time to do that in the history of your franchise. So this is where I'm pushing all the chips to the table, and I'm going after those guys. I'm going after the Patrick Kanes, the Tarasenkos, those type of guys. Or if you go with a Jacob Chikrin, who that would bolster your defensive core even more with McAvoy, Lindholm, Chikrin. Boy, just look at that. Look at that defensive front and try and stop me with that. But if you can bolster and get those other pieces and bring them in here, do it. Don't get scared. Okay, I'm going to trade away Fabian Lysell. Yes, I think he's a good player, young player, but the Bruins system is 28th, 29th in the NHL or 30th. They're not a good farm system. And I know you want to try to hold on to Lysell, but if you can get a piece to help you win a cup in a farm system that, okay, I'm trading with the one good piece. Okay, it's not like for me, it's, yeah, you're trading away your best piece and you're leaving the cupboard bare down on the minors. Okay, but this is a situation where you're obviously in a win now mode. So I'm saying, damn the torpedoes, just go get whoever you think can help you win in this situation. And I'm all for it. I am seriously all for it. So if you're the Bruins, definitely with the trade deadline still, like I said, it seems like it's always far away, but this year really feels further away. March 7th. So you got to get something. You got to make sure that you fill any holes that you have. Go get maybe that third line scorer, or get some more depth at scoring. Or if you think you need Jacob Chikrin to bolster the line, go and get it. Don't hesitate and use the resources you have. If that means giving up Lysell, give them up and get that piece. So I'm all for it. I certainly am all for it. Now, as we mentioned, the Red Sox are down in Fort Myers as they are kicking off spring training. So there hasn't been a lot of on-field news. Of course, some of the big story there has been with Evan Drellick's book out about the Houston Astros cheating scandal, which Alex Cora, who was the bench coach, gets wrapped up into that. And then, of course, there were the quotes about Drellick put in his novel about Alex Cora when in the 2018 season about the whole video scandal there, and of course the whole comments about Alex Cora making to some of his players. Now, however, the tone of this, because some people want to make it sound like he was bragging and really going after some of his players, being like, "Oh yeah, this is the way we did in Houston," and making it sound like he's boasting everybody or could. I mean, trust me, I've been around enough players that have played baseball in my career at college level. Some of them have even had some minor league experience. I've been around people that play baseball, and yeah, are you going to have some of those overinflated egos at times with some players? Yes, that's going to happen in all sports. But for the most part, baseball guys just like to shoot the shit with each other, and they just like to give each other back and forth some jabs. But I don't picture it the same way in my head that I see with other people that like want to say like, oh, he's just running around bragging to people. I think it's just been in some conversations that have been brought up. That's all. But that's kind of been the topic, has been with some of those comments that Alex Cora has made, and he's obviously trying to play the diplomatic role of trying to of like, yeah, he's set. I mean, he to his credit in the past, he's like, yeah, that's part of my past, and but just going to try to move on. Of course, now he's more in the okay, yeah, it's happened, and he understands, but he's just trying to move forward and trying to do what's in the best interest for the team, which you kind of figured that was going to come from Alex. But I know some people want to try to attack Alex's character, but Alex Cora to me is the best manager in baseball. Yeah, may I be a homer? Sure. But we're talking about baseball more than any other sport is about massaging the egos of your players because you're around them for 162 games and what 180 days of the year or more, 190 days or 200 some odd days of the year, if you count spring training and all that. So these guys have to be good people, have good people skills, good communication skills. You can't just be a stiff board up there that, oh, I have just a computer brain, but I have no interpersonal communication, no bonding skills. You have to be able to connect with people. And that's what Alex Cora is great at, is connecting with all of his players. And he marries that with a great baseball mind. And yeah, okay, yes, was he the bench coach on the Houston Astros? Was he the Red Sox manager in 2018 when they had the video? I mean, to a very lesser extent, and this is something that a lot of people have cited that other clubs have done. So I don't. Yes, am I throwing rocks from a glass house? Probably, but at the same time, we're all doing it. Like the Houston Astros just did it way up here. Well, the Red Sox and like teams like the Dodgers, who like people from inside the Dodgers have said have said clandestinely or have kind of said it behind the curtain of unanimity of kind of the veil of secrecy here. I don't, man, I'm struggling for that word. I'm sure somebody's going to be screaming or whether listen to the podcast. This is the what you're trying to say. But um, the point being there with Alex Cora is yes, was he part of those? But he's such a good baseball mind, even without some of that help. He's one of the best managers in baseball. So I don't want to chase him out of town. And I know some people are like, oh, this is going to be just like Mac Jones as far as this is going to be his make or break year. No, yeah, the man skippered the team that won a World Series in 2018 and showed us how good he is of a manager. And this is also a guy that showed us in 2021 when he had proper tools that he can manage his team deep into a playoff run. This is a guy that pushes the right buttons on a daily basis during the game. And the only reason last year was such a disaster is because the front office isn't helping him. If you want to blame somebody, blame the front office, blame Heim Bloom, blame ownership. Alex Cora just wasn't given enough last year. So I don't want to chase him out of town. I want to keep Alex Cora in town as long as I can. I really love Alex Cora. I really do. So I don't want to chase him out of town at all. I really don't. So that's kind of been the biggest story out of spring training, because obviously this year the biggest, like what would have been the biggest story heading into spring training as far as Rafael Devers not having a contract extension, that was what we all thought. That's all what it was trending towards. But the Red Sox, surprisingly and happily so, should I state, signed Rafael Devers to that big contract extension in December. So we all breathed a sigh of relief on that one. Rafael Devers is locked up for 11 years here at the Boston Red Sox. So he is under control for a long time. He's long term. And then on top of that, so that would have been the biggest story. It would have been like with Xander Bogaerts heading into the 2021 campaign and then heading into the 2022 campaign for 2 straight years. It was, oh, what are we going to do with What are we going to do with Xander? 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 And obviously we saw how that turned out. But this spring training after you signed Rafael Devers, it's kind of been, all right, how's this team going to do? Of course, all the negativity in the offseason. Of course, I was right behind that train of you didn't do enough. You screwed up. You didn't bring back Bogaerts. That was a priority. You should have gone out and gotten another high-end rotation arm, another high-end starter. You did beef up the bullpen. Yeah, I know Kenley Jansen is older, but at least you did get arms in the bullpen. You got Chris Martin as well. And you did bring in some other pieces for the bullpen. So you've kind of shored that up. You did get Corey Kluber, which if you got a front end of the starter, so like if you went out and traded for, I'm just throwing it out there, Corbin Burns, Shane Bieber, or you got Pablo Lopez before he got traded to the Minnesota Twins, or you got Trevor Rogers from the Marlins. I know they're not going to give up Sandy Alcantara, at least not this year. Maybe once he gets too expensive, they'll trade him. And then finally, the Red Sox can knock on the door. But the point with this all is that they should have gone out, traded for one of those guys. They didn't. They didn't trade for any of them. And they didn't go sign any of the Max Scherzer. Well, Max Scherzer was last year. Max Scherzer was this off. No, Max Scherzer was last year. Boy, my mind scrambled eggs after today at work. But Max Scherzer was last year. They signed the Mets signed Ben Verlander. Wow, they did not sign Justin Verlander's brother, Ben Verlander, who's on Fox. They signed Justin Verlander. I'm on a roll tonight. They signed Justin Verlander. They were also Jacob deGrom was the big fish. There we go. Jacob deGrom was the huge fish out there. He was going to cost a lot. He went to the Texas Rangers. They didn't get into that market. The one that I thought they might have a chance was the Verlander one, but they didn't offer him, and I don't blame him because he went to the Mets, who are trying to build up and go for a shot at the World Series. And then then you had Rendon, who I really wanted Rendon. He went to the Yankees, and then it kind of fell off after that. But so you didn't make those moves. You didn't go out and get any of the other top free agents that were out there at shortstop. You didn't go out, get a top of the list outfielder. You didn't go make a trade for another bat. So you're kind of, you cobbled things together. Yes, you did bring in Duvall, and I know I talked about, I like Duvall's power, but still Duvall's 36. So we're not talking about spring chicken here. And obviously we're not talking about a guy that's going to learn how to be a average hitter. We're talking about a guy that's going to he'll hit 25 to 35 home runs a year. He's going to have his bombs. He's going to hit well. So that's going to be, so you got some power, but you still don't have a complete player. Then you brought in Justin Turner, who's 38 years old. So the best days are behind him. So to be a DH, because he's not going to play third, and unless the days where they give Rafi a day off. Though obviously the one unknown there is with Yoshida. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, there are veteran pieces, but really it's only Rafael Devers, and that's it. Rafael Devers, and this is on the offensive side. So it's Rafael Devers, and because the other sure thing that you had was Trevor Story, but he obviously is out with the surgery. And some news today that he's optimistic that it's going to be on, that he'll be able to come back in the later after the season, but he did acknowledge that there is still that chance that he misses all of this year, which I'm leaning on missing all of this year when you have like a not a full Tommy John, but you're having a half Tommy John basically, and that's kind of how that worked out. So will be interesting to see. And of course, so really it's just Rafael Devers, and then you're relying on to see if Tristan Casas can develop into that power bat, if you can get more out of Verdugo, and then if Yoshida can develop into something. So I mean, obviously I think Casas can be a good piece to that lineup, but you're going to have to need more. You're going to have to get more. So we'll see. I don't think we're going to have a 2013 Red Sox situation over again, but we'll see if maybe they surprise people. What you got to aim for is getting a 500 this year. Just have a 500 season, develop some of the young guys, and see if got me. And then speaking of developing young guys, that develop a guy like Brian Bay on the rotation, and really the way that you're going to try to scratch and claw for a wild card spot, in my opinion, is you develop a Brian Bale. Maybe what we all thought he was going to be last year after his call up, and I know we were all being a little unrealistic, but if he develops into a number 2 starter, or God forbid he develops into a number 1, if he develops into a solid starter basically, and then Chris Sale is by miracles of miracles, he stays healthy, and we see the old Chris Sale, or at least one that's reinvented himself into more than just a power pitcher, but a complete pitcher. If you have Chris Sale back, you get a Brian Bayo develops into something, then you're starting to cook a little bit. And if Corey Kluber, who obviously is getting a little long in the tooth, but if he can put together another good veteran season, we're not looking for the 2016 Cy Young Award winner here. We're just looking for a solid veteran performance. And if Nick Pivetta, who can be up and down, can just give you some innings, and then depending on if Tanner Houck stays in that rotation. So you have interesting pieces. Now, again, we're not talking about, I mean, Chris Sale is the one that obviously has proven in the past that he's an ace. The one piece that you're looking that could be that true X factor of the Red Sox rotation is going to be Brian Bayo. If he really turns into something, if he turns into a good major league pitcher, then that really that really gives a little extra shot in the arm to that Red Sox rotation. Now they're still going to need more, because I don't put all my eggs in the basket of Chris Sale staying healthy. So it's going to be Chris Sale, me, and then you're going to have to get guys like Cutter Crawford and Josh Winkowski to contribute as well if Chris Sale can't stay healthy. But yeah, there's interesting pieces. Again, the two X factors are Chris Sale's health, and can Brian Bayo evolve into what we hope he can be. So those are going to be interesting. But all in all, there's way too many question marks on this Red Sox team. We'll talk about them more as we get closer to the start of the regular season. But again, this is something where you're holding your breath on this, and it's put together duct tape and glue and bubble gum and wishes, and you're really praying that you can just kind of push this cobbled together cart to the finish line. Is the way this is going. So I don't know if they're going to be a record all-time bad, because they did bring in some veterans, but this is still, we're not looking at a team that I'm all psyched up about that I think is going to do great things. This is just the developmental year, at least in my book. And trust me, the Red Sox should never be in the position of developmental years. They should never be there, because you're the Boston effing Red Sox. You have all these resources, and I'm not going to go into a 30-minute diatribe like I have in the past about this. But again, the Boston Red Sox, you can afford to go out and spend on big money free agents or go out and trade. You should never be in this position, especially everybody's well chronicled why they're in this position. And it's just sad that this is where we're going to have to be for this season, where I never want to be in this position. This sucks, but we're here. there's nothing I or you or anybody outside the Red Sox organization or that plays for them can do that. And maybe just maybe they'll be a pleasant surprise, but I'm not holding my breath on it. So we'll see how that goes for the Boston Red Sox. And as we like to always do, I know there's no football here, but one thing, especially with sports gambling coming to Massachusetts, and obviously it's been approved here in the state of Maine, and we're just waiting for the rules and everything to be passed so that we can officially bet. But I am going to we're going to stick with giving you the one big bet of the week. And of course, there's obviously more than just football out there to bet on, folks. If you're a degenerate gambler like myself, I finally come to that realization that I am. Then you have the NHL, you have the NBA. We'll have baseball starting up here, obviously at the end of March. March 30th is opening day. And then we have other events that are happening, but the one big bet that I have, we'll stick in a familiar world here, and we'll take the Boston Bruins and the Nashville Predators, which is happening tomorrow night. And we'll take the Bruins in the money line. And of course, and then give me, let's see, give me the puck line, give me, excuse me, give me total goals for the Bruins of 5.5. I feel pretty good about that. I feel like they can or for this game of 5.5, and that gives you a plus 170. So if you put down $20, that gets you to $54. So we're not talking football winning money here, but this is one that I feel pretty good about with the Bruins going to the Nashville Predators. And I think there's a pretty good shot that the Bruins, at least in my opinion, get 3 goals and minimum three goals. I feel like this is a 4 goals. What am I saying here? I feel like this is a 4-2 win for the Bruins, at least at this point, maybe a 5-2. So you get that 7 and hammer that over in that point. But yeah, I do. So that's that we're going with the Bruins and the 5.5 goal line for the game. All right, folks. Well, that is going to do it for this week of your New England Sports Weekly podcast. Remember to tune in next week. We will get into more of the Bruins and the Celtics as well, as they are getting deep into their seasons. And of course, with the Bruins getting closer to the deadline, we'll look at that as well. Of course, anything pops up with the New England Patriots and the NFL, now that we're into the offseason, we will get into that as well. And of course, with the Red Sox underway in spring training, baseball is right around the corner, as that will open up on March 31st. So we'll get into any Red Sox news and start to look forward to that season as well. And as always, if you have any questions, you can hit us up in the live chat or go to the Twitter account for myself, which is Sean_Met28. And that's also the same handle on Instagram. And send me any questions there as well. Or you can hit up the show account on Twitter, which is NE Sports Weekly. Send questions there. Or you can hit up the Instagram account, which is NE Sports WK. And of course, remember to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Hit the like and hit the bell button, bell notifications as well. And of course, you can always find us on Spotify and SoundCloud by typing in New England Sports Weekly, and hit the like and subscribe there as well to follow along any time of the day, any day of the week. All right, folks. Well, that will do it for this week's episode. You have yourself a good week.